We are striving to set an example by dedication, integrity, and purpose in word and deed, which our children's children may follow without hesitation.
A moment's reflection shows that liberalism is entirely negative. It is not a formative force, but always and only a disintegrating one. It wishes to depose the twin authorities of church and nation, substituting for them economic freedom and social ethics. It happens that organic realities do not permit of more than two alternatives. The organism can be true to itself, or it becomes sick and distorted, a prey for other organisms. Thus, the natural polarity of leaders and those being led cannot be abolished without annihilating the organism itself. For liberalism was never entirely successful in its fight against the nation-state, despite the fact that it engaged in political activity throughout the 19th and 20th centuries in alliance with every other type of national disintegrating force, most notably communism. Thus, there were national liberals, social liberals, free conservatives, liberal Catholics, and all of these allied themselves with democracy, which is actually not a liberal political form, but irresistibly authoritarian in success. They sympathized with anarchists when the forces of authority sought to defend themselves against them. And in the 20th century, liberalism joined the Marxists in Spain, and European and American liberals sympathized with genocidal Bolshevism. Liberalism, therefore, can only be defined negatively. It is a mere critique, not a living idea. It means, in fact, freedom from natural authority, i.e., disintegration of the national organism. In its last stages, it produces social atomism, in which not only the authority of the state is combated, but even the worth of society and family. Divorce takes equal rank with marriage, children with parents. This continuous reasoning in negative values caused political activists like Lawrence V. Stein and Ferdinand Lassalle to despair of it as a political vehicle. Its attitudes were always contradictory. It sought always a compromise. It sought always to balance democracy against monarchy, managers against hand workers, state against society, or legislative against judicial. In a crisis, liberalism as such was not to be found. Liberals went on their way to one or another side of a revolutionary struggle, depending on the consistency of the liberalism and its degree of hostility towards ordered humanity. Thus, liberalism in action was just as political as any state ever was. It obeyed organic necessity by its political alliances with non-liberal groups and ideas. Despite its theory of individualism, which of course would preclude the possibility that one man or group could call upon another for the sacrifice or risk of life, it supported unfree ideas like democracy, socialism, Bolshevism, and anarchism, all of which demanded living sacrifices. Modern liberal ideology derived from the Enlightenment rationalism which produced 18th century encyclopedism, Freemasonry, and the cult of the individual. Each played its historical part in the 19th century, but owing to the critical distortion of the whole of Western civilization entailed by the world wars, even in the 20th century, where rationalism was grotesquely out of place, post-Enlightenment thought slowly transformed into postmodern irrationalism. The corpse of liberalism was not even interred when it should have been by the end of the 20th century. Consequently, it is necessary to diagnose the serious illness now afflicting Western civilization, as liberalism continues to complicate its societal health. Because liberalism views most men as harmonious or good, it follows that they should be allowed to do as they like, since there is no higher unit to which all are tied, and whose superpersonal life dominates their own. Each field of human activity seeks to serve only itself, as long as it does not wish to become authoritative and stays within the framework of the new society. Thus, art became art for art's sake. All areas of thought and action become equally autonomous. Religion becomes mere social discipline, since to become spiritual and believe in a higher order of things is to assume authority. Science, philosophy, education are all equally worlds unto themselves. None are subject to anything greater. Literature and technical schools are entitled to the same autonomy. The function of the state is merely to protect them by patents and copyrights. And above all, economics and law must be independent of organic natural authority. The entire situation that the West currently finds itself corresponds from this very notion, that economics and law are no longer governed by political or divine authority. There is nothing higher, no nation-state. It is only individuals and their tribal groups against one another. It is but natural that the economically more astute individuals accumulate most of the mobile wealth into their hands. But they do not, however, if they are true liberals, want authority with this wealth. For authority has two aspects, power and responsibility, and the liberal only wants the former, not the latter. This immediately conjures up the image of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the grandfather of liberalism and a true individualist, who sent his 5 children upon their births to the foundling hospital, never having seen their faces. In his contest against divine political authority, the liberal evolved a fallacious theory that power corrupts men. It is, however, vast anonymous wealth which corrupts, since there are no superpersonal restraints on it. But it is precisely in the fields of economics and law that the liberal doctrine had the most destructive effects on the health of Western civilization. Allowing the initiative in economic and technical matters to rest with individuals resulted in the development of opportunists whose personal wills were more important than the collective destiny of the nation. The law which served this state of affairs was completely divorced from morality and honor. To disintegrate the body politic from any spiritual cognition, morality was divorced from metaphysics and religion as they related to society. Thus the independence of the economic sphere was a tenet of faith with liberalism. This was not subject to discussion. There even evolved an abstraction called economic units, whose actions could be predicted as though economics were a vacuum. Financial gain was his sole motive, greed alone spurred him on. The technique of success was to concentrate on one's own gain and ignore the national well-being. This economic unit was, however, simply man in general to liberalism. He was the unit of its world-view, and humanity was the sum total of these economic grains of sand. Nietzsche, in his last and greatest work, designated the 18th century as the century of feminism, and immediately mentioned Rousseau, the leader of the mass escape from reality. This socialization process was but a means of feminizing European man, and it did so by transforming him first into a creature whose only concern was with personal economics. Modern Western society after 1945 was then further engineered by a new crop of post-rationalist liberals into feminine environments, static and formal, where all contests were purely personal, free from the possibility of real heroism. What they failed to understand is that history is masculine. It follows a higher destiny coded into the very fabric of the cosmos. And if we Europeans in the West want our fate back in our hands, then we must stop reckoning ourselves in liberal postmodern terms, and as something supremely historical, an organic part of the infinite.